What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. I am a game designer on the Summoner's Rift team of League of Legends. We are the team largely responsible for the balance updates and systems updates you see every couple of weeks here in your patch notes. If you want to know more about what planning went into this patch, I have another video on the channel, which is the sort of patch preview about a week ago. I have another video about balancing for worlds and what can make that very difficult with the patch structure we had this year. Also, if you want to know how patch 13.18 landed, have a video on that one as well, which is a retrospective on what worked and didn't from the previous patch. Here to talk to you about patch 13.19. This is going to be somewhat shorter than the other patch rundown, since a lot of the hows and whys were covered earlier, but there might be some fun stories here. Stick around, should be a good time. I'm also going to try to not do math and things that don't require the math, since it doesn't seem to be all that important. Let's get into it for realsies, though. Alrighty, so 13.19 is the patch for the League of Legends World Championship. This does mean there is some balance with an eye toward pro play. I do want to talk about one thing with pro play balance, which is it does really hurt me to, for example, have to nerf champions like Jinx, where they're stuck in pro jail, and we had to nerf like 50% win rate Jinx because she was like ubiquitous in pro play. That really sucks. I hate having to do that, and the goal going forward is to do that less. We are still going to do balance for things like the Midseason Invitational and Worlds, and specifically make some changes there as a specific result of that. Occasionally, we will do some side grade moves because of pro play, but we're going to tend to pro jail champions less going forward, so hold us to that. That is our goal for the next year. Obviously, there's no more pro play for the rest of our patches, so gloves are off until the next year, and hopefully again until May. That's the hope here going forward. That said, a couple of interesting things happening on. So for example, right, Azir is nerfed only because of pro play. He's totally healthy pick rate, totally healthy ban rate. His win rate is sub 50, but to be fair, he is a high mastery champion. He can be balanced while sub 50% win rate because he just requires more practice. This is totally fine. Unfortunately, yes, this is a victim of pro balance where it is the World Championship. We have reason to believe Azir is a strong front runner for #1 mid laner in pro play, and so a tap to Azir. Briar has simply taken off like a rocket. She's been doing really well. Ever since people have gotten better and better at learning her. So, of course, LeBlanc is here because AD LeBlanc showed up like a bat out of hell. We talked about it on Friday evening. We put together a set of changes, play tested them. We play tested AD and AP LeBlanc. We saw that there were some meaningful gains in the AD build. We saw that the AP build still felt pretty good. Added one more functional line of change into Monday, and then managed to sneak that into this patch. Basically, I'll talk in the LeBlanc section about why we chose to make this change, but ultimately got this one in. Rek'Sai got buffed with Stride Breaker. Ultimately, we had nerfed her to a level that we were comfortable. She was still doing very well in Elite MMR, but Rek'Sai is a very elite skewed champion, and ultimately said, okay, she gained power after we nerfed her. We should take a swing and try to actually do a little bit more to crush the elite skew and try to not have to keep doing balance follow-up changes onto Rek'Sai. Renekton, this is another pro play one. He is, to be fair, one of the very most picked champions in Challenger. In general, we're hoping that we can give him more variance in matchups to make him less of a safe blind pick. Zeri, another pro play. Unfortunate pickup here where she's not causing a lot of problems in solo queue overall. And then a slew of buffs, which are all larger champions who just simply can be buffed very safely. They are not usually big ban rate threats. In some cases, they're actually just looking weak as far as solo queue data. We are aware this is a pro play patch, but these are all champions that, one, don't have any programs anyway, so it's very safe, and two, there's champions that we can just simply buff because there's room to buff them, and that's fine. Systems update to a few items that are under or overperforming. All right, let's get into the specific details. Up first is the change to Azir. Not much to say. Trying to just tap down Azir's early game. Anytime you have a really, really frequently picked pro play champion where they're nearly blindable or you can play them every single game of a series, it means that they don't have exploitable enough weaknesses. And one of the interesting things here with a champion like Azir is in solo queue, mid lane matchups are much closer to 50-50 physical magic than they are in pro play, where pro play, other than Tristana and the occasional Jace, if you're in China, it's all magic damage. And if I'm looking at recent pro play, Tristana's perma-banned, so it's really just a lot of Talia, a lot of Azir. LeBlanc, even if she's doing like Shiv AP, is still a large amount of damage champion. And so there's this interesting thing where we actually probably could unpro jail some mid laners by just giving them a lot more armor and then say, look, they're solo queue when it's balanced. They're okay into Zed. And it's not going to be as big of a deal in pro play because pro play doesn't often have that many AD mids. Random thought, I don't want to get too deep into the woods there, but regardless, Azir seems to not be exploitable enough in the early game. Now, the changes that shipped with Azir throughout the year, the big changes were in 13.5, then a follow-up buff in like 0.7 or something, then like a really big follow-up buff in 0.11. Or 0.10 or 0.11, something around there. We got Azir to a pretty good state where his solo queue win rates are better than they have been in a very, very, very long time. For most of the year, his pro play presence has been around 50% post buffs, which is very healthy for Azir. He's never been top dog ever since the big reshape, which is really successful. I think we're really, really happy with what happened with Azir, but he is still a little bit too blindable, so we like to open up some bad matchups, and so it's a nerf to his early game, a little bit less soldier positioning. Not much to say here, but a small Azir nerf because of pro play. And I think there is a world where we can reshape this champion a bit further, give him something like more armor to give him generic solo queue power. That doesn't really affect pro play, and it's probably a decent path forward for many mid lane champions that have traditionally been in pro jail. It's a thought. I'm not sure if we'll get to it, but it might be a good idea to look at several champions and maybe approach that as a balance lever. Let's move forward. Briar, as I mentioned, has been doing launched. I had called in the previous patch that she was going to have one of the lowest launch win rates of all time. I was right. She has 2 different int buttons, and that was going to make her day 0 win rate really, really bad. So I got to get that one correctly. We got some early internal mastery curve data back, and it is the sharpest, steepest mastery curve any of us has ever seen for any champion in the history of League of Legends. So Briar, to be fair, again, she has a literal int button. She has the sharpest mastery curve that anyone has ever seen. So yeah, that said though, if you put the games in on Briar, she is indeed very, very strong. I suspect we'll have to nerf Briar several more patches down the line, and that it's gonna be kind of like Nefiri. We're gonna have to sort of keep up with player mastery progression and just follow up patch after patch after patch. This ends up being a fairly light touch. Briar, if you've been a Briar main, she will still be very, very strong in your hands. I've been playing a fair bit of Briar. I'm maybe 10 games deep on live so far. She's really fun. I mean, she's a really, really cool champion, but yeah, I think this champion is nerfed this patch, and I think will be nerfed in the near future as well. So some good QL stuff, some overall nerfs here as well. Basic attack speed growth is just a small DPS nerf. Q now lets you preserve Halo Blades. That's good. This is actually a really, really nice one. A Fury bar is now here for the W and the R. I believe they're different colors. I know we were discussing if they should both be yellow, if one should be yellow, one should be red. I voted for W is yellow and R is red. I don't know what we actually landed on, but a Fury bar is a very, very good idea. I think it's a really, really smart change. So shout out August for a nice sort of QOL visibility thing. So both, I believe she and her opponents can tell how long is left on the W frenzy duration. I think it's really sweet. Some tool updates, which is nice. A small reshape to snack attack here. This is basically technically slightly more healing early on, though you max this one first, so it's not a very big deal. The appropriate skill order is, I believe, to put a second point in W at 3. So by champion level 3, it's a nerf. Your first 2 camps, honestly, I come out full health from my jungle clear with only using 1 smite. This isn't going to, I mean, maybe this starts to matter. I mean, it's just going to be here. Maybe this maybe starts to matter a little bit here. The bigger thing is the increased damage against minions and monsters on the W second auto, and the maximum damage you can get from missing health damage. Those are going to slow down the clear a little bit, which is good. So, we might see Briar's clear go, 4 seconds, 3 seconds slower or something, which is really positive. Keep in mind that right, 100 damage is 2 autos, which takes you more than a full second because your W is then off cooldown and you're just doing your basic auto attack. So, this is pretty meaningful. This is like basically every single camp going to take you at least 1 more second to clear. This does have a meaningful impact. This could be a pretty big deal. All fun stuff here overall. Pretty big stuff. And then this is a nice bug fix for Chilling Stream hitting things like Jarvan R. That's good. Ping R now tells you which enemies are in range. That's good. That's the pretty default tech we have for quasi-globals that don't always reach people. That's really solid. and then some miscellaneous stuff for updated items. So yeah, good changes here, right? Pretty good amount of QOL, which is positive. A little bit of nerf. I think this does do a fair bit. This does have some pretty heavy weight here. Overall, good changes, and I think again there probably will be some follow up nerfs to Briar. I do have some numbers real quick, so we can look at her baseline attacks per second. Again, not a very huge difference to be really clear. Right? This isn't a huge deal, but it is slightly lower attacks per second. And then in the case of while your W is on, what's the attack speed difference? Again, these aren't really big changes. The bigger thing is the W itself. But yeah, you're going to do about 1% less DPS late game. Again, not a huge deal. It's something, though. Fair enough, moving forward. So next up is Galio. I talked about some of the context here for this earlier. Ultimately, the idea is that Galio is going to be a sort of weak side laner. He's not going to have prio, but he's going to be able to use his global to get around the map and make good plays. And look, Galio is very lightly weak. He's going to get 20 seconds off his ult cooldown, so he can do the global thing more often. I think we can probably start moving back on global cooldowns and kind of soften them as time goes on. This is happening with Galio. It's happening with Gangplank here as well. But overall, sure, right, a light buff to Galio. This is not going to be huge. We saw with Aurelia last patch, she got a 15-second flat cooldown reduction on her R, and that gave her like 0.4% win rate. I'm not expecting this to be a very big bump to Galio. He's also not exactly in the dumpster. It's a light buff. It's a small bit of power. I don't have a lot of thoughts to give here. I didn't do design work on choosing his changes, so I didn't, do the analysis on like where I think his strength and weaknesses should be. But this is going to be a small amount of power to Galio. This is a champion who can use a bit of power, so that is what it's going to happen. That's going to be the end result here. Next up is going to be Gangplank. So I actually did the design work on the Gangplank buff here. So essentially, there's a lot of places that we're not really willing to go here with Gangplank. It's actually written down here. We can't really bring his damage any higher than it already is. And so ultimately, it's like, what else can we give him? Don't want him to be the perennial easy weak side top laner, so you can't just like make oranges better or health regen better. Like the fact that Gangplank can be abusable in the early game is good. Gangplank has been pro jailed before by being like just an incredible weak side top laner that then globals down the bot lane, but it doesn't matter, you can't punish him, and then it just gets kind of ugly. And so a lot of the early progression stuff where you are meant to kill your opponent, you're meant to burn your mana down, you're meant to kind of fight back and forth, you can't just safely farm, like all these things say, okay, there's a lot of things that we're not really willing to change on short notice here. But hey, we can play up some of his more unique niches, which is, yes, you do in fact have a stronger ultimate. Also identifying that the only really good upgrade to his R is, I think it's called Fire at Will. It's the one where the attack, the drop rate increases over time. It's like, look, I'm not saying we're going to replace the first best upgrade, but if the other two upgrades kind of suck, let's give him two good upgrades that matter. Especially if some of his power budget is in getting to a second and third evolve. This means that if you can, push him down in lane and prevent some stack for a bit longer, then you delay more of the champion's power budget. And so, hey, we increase the utility, we increase the skill of trying to aim R, we increase the generic teamfight utility of we chase you down with some move speed. Again, this isn't going to be an absolute ton of power. Again, these won't matter until 1,000 and 1,500 Silver Serpents. The 10-second cooldown, again, is not going to be a huge amount of win rate here, but hey, it's a soft touch to Gangplank. He could use some more power. Worth noting that the tooltips are going to be out of date here. They are already rescripted in 13.20. That's already been submitted. In fact, you can get it scraped off the PPE right now, but the R tooltips in 13.20. So next patch, these upgrades will be in the R itself, and so it'll be much easier for you to look at and much easier for us to maintain going forward. In fact, the current Death's Daughter item is actually wrong. The slow is only 1 second, but Death's Daughter says it's 1.5. The wiki just copies it from the item, because why wouldn't it? Why would the tooltip be wrong? Well, the tooltip's wrong because it's hard-coded into the item. Items can't look up champion spells for their tooltip, so there's no way of doing it. And by the way, Gangplank stuff, because you buy it from the shop, are actually items. Then when you buy the item, it gives him a buff, and then his spell says, if you have this buff, then we're going to behave differently, and all this stuff going on. But anyway, yeah, the items all had hard-coded tooltips because items can't look up champion spells. And so, again, at 13.20, it's all going to be put in the R itself. It's going to look up his own spells. Congratulations. And the items are going to be like, gives you some true damage, and then you can just read R for what it actually does. So, in about 2 weeks, there'll be about a tooltip for Gangplank R. Congratulations. Either way, yeah, some honestly light changes to Gangplank, but I think these are directionally good things for him. But yeah, we're not going for a ton of power here. Next up is Jhin. Jhin is, again, a champion that I did the design work on implementing. I am continuing on with the idea that I want to make sure champions have good baseline reliability in their ultimates. I think we can nudge in a good direction. I especially think that bot lane is in need of good weak side bot laners. basically every role but bot lane, pretty much, has a suite of champions where you can play them weak side and they're going to be reasonably useful, right? You think about Sion, Ornn, Malphite, you can weak side them. There's some mid laners that you can kind of weak side, and it's like, yep, I'm going to sit under my turret, I'm going to farm, I'm going to be hard to dive, it's okay, I'll see y'all later. Obviously, mid lane is generally a pretty high prio lane, so there's a lot going on there. Of course, junglers are, a lot of early gank pressure, but like, hey, if you're playing Maokai and you don't get a bunch of gold, you're still Maokai or Sejuani or whatever, right? Like, not every champion is Master Yi or Bel'Veth where they scale incredibly well with gold, but all the AD carries are very, very close in agency because they all essentially scale really, really hard with gold. And look, Jhin can be a damage champion, but hey, if Jhin and Ashe as more utility-focused champions are going to be, they're going to be a little bit more allowed to be weak side bot laners where, Malphite takes a lane of farm, and obviously late game he will sack the waves to the AD carry or something, but for strategic depth, having some weak side bot laners I think is very, very good. And so Jhin is one of the better frontrunners for this, where I think it can make sense that Jhin can be a weak side bot laner. And so I'm nudging him in this direction to give some more depth to the role. Again, I think Jhin has room for some small buffs. We buffed Stormrazor last patch. He didn't get as much win rate as we thought he would, so we get to do follow-up buffs here. And just the overall idea that I'm holding to my heart, which is that I think more than currently, champions should have stronger baseline ulti output so that even if you're having a bad game, your ult is still going to do something for you and you have a way back in. So even if you are 0-3 and the Darius is 3-0 on you, you can do something decent because even if you got behind, there's still a job you can fulfill even without getting a bunch of gold or a bunch of levels. So I'm trying to nudge in that direction a little bit. Anyway, what is the sum total change? Well, keep in mind, R has a total AD ratio, and Jhin has the highest total AD of any champion in the game because of how his passive works. And so it's got to be a math problem. Let's get into it. This is Jin's R minimum damage, assuming going from about 0 to 4 items, which is buying about 204 bonus AD, which is roughly 4 50 AD items. This is accounting for his passive giving him % more AD via bonus attack speed, via just innately, via crit chance. And again, it's a total AD ratio, so even just champion levels scale this as well. And so the end result is about 14% more damage on the ulti in the average game. Now, if he's really, really snowballing, it's going to be a bit less than this. If he's doing really, really poorly, percentage-wise, it'll be a bit more than this. But hey, the tooltips get to end in 4. The last one gets to end in 2 4s. Isn't that cute? And then also, of course, hey, overall damage increased by about 14%. Great. We go for some theming. We go for some buffs. Yeah, Jhin should look pretty good overall. One thing I do want to point out is flat ulti throughput tends to be a pretty pro-skewed lever. To be fair, I think pro could use a dose of low agency, weak side bot laners. So I don't mind if Jhin becomes like a top 3 AD carry at Worlds. I think that's totally fine. Again, we don't want to pro jail him. I think, again, ulti throughput is a really easy one to look at for this, but I expect this to have a disproportionate impact in pro. I don't mind that being a knock-on effect here, but again, I think there's just a lot of things that I hold important, that I stack rank, and that all of these lead me to say that I think Jhin should do more damage on the R. And yes, his role is still damage on the team, and it's better. Let's move forward. So we got LeBlanc changes in pretty late into this patch. This is technically micro-patched into 13.19, but we developed some, relatively simple changes that we're going to go in. And of course, it looks like a lot here, right? Let's go into it. So the first thing first, her level 1 attack speed has not changed. This is the attack speed ratio. This is how well she scales with further bonus attack speed. This is basically a make good on this change, but what it means is that buying a Static Shiv, buying a Trinity Force is going to give you about 1/3 less attack speed than it would otherwise. Her attack damage growth is simply going down, saying that, hey, late game, you're going to be less and less about auto-attacking. This innately is a multiplier against Trinity Force, since Trinity Force's Sheen effect is based on base AD, and the Threefold Strikes passive is also based on base AD. Additionally, it is a pretty severe nerf to her mana growth and her mana regen growth, since when she's playing as mid lane, she can buy Luden's Tempest. By the way, I actually did a lot of spot checking here. One of the more common builds for LeBlanc right now is still Static Shiv Night Harvester. And considering that that goes into like regular AP from there, right? So she actually has builds where she builds a non-mana mythic and is functional as ostensibly a full mage because it's Harvester into AP into AP into AP. And if she just subs out Harvester for Luden's Tempest, that basically more than makes up for all of the nerfs here. In addition to the fact that on present patch League of Legends, first item Ludens is actually a higher win rate than first item Static Shiv for mid LeBlanc. on average. I do think this is a really good amount of pushing us away from static Shiv LeBlanc. Ultimately, my supposition here is that certainly LeBlanc is really, really good at abusing Shiv. She's really good at abusing Energize. The AD build she's doing is Stormrazor 4th, as well as Static Shiv 1st. The AP build, of course, we're seeing a lot of Static Shiv 1st. But I think a big thing is that actually her numbers have just slowly fallen out of line over time. So compared to a champion like Ahri, the relative base damages versus AP ratios of LeBlanc are base damage skewed compared to AP ratio skewed. And so LeBlanc has basically less damage per golden AP than another mage like Ahri. I didn't check every mage in the game, but she has generically pretty low AP ratios for her damage. In fact, if you wanted to make her equal to Ahri, we'd actually need to go for another like 5%, like another 5% AP on one or two more spells to even reach that bar. But the point this patch is to be pretty low scope. We did not have much time for testing. And so it was, okay, it's very important that we address AD LeBlanc. So let's talk about why we're addressing AD LeBlanc in this patch. Because I've seen plenty of players and fairly say, Riot, why are you killing an alt build? Shouldn't players be allowed to experiment? And in general, yes, players should be allowed to experiment. For example, we are buffing AP Nunu this patch, which is an alt build in this very patch. So to say that Riot kills every alt build in the game is clearly wrong because we're buffing AP Nunu. In the case of Twitch from a while back, AP Twitch and AD Twitch are now relatively balanced. We nerfed AP Twitch because it was overperforming, and now AP Twitch is fair and is a supported build for the champion. Kai'Sa has an AD build, a hybrid build, and an AP build. Now, we think that the AP build's gameplay is pretty weak, and there maybe should be some kit adjustments in, the relatively near future, because I think the gameplay of AP Kai'Sa isn't great. But if the gameplay is good, we're willing to support the champion. If the gameplay is bad, it makes the game worse, and we want to get rid of things that are bad for the game. This is just like the basic thing. If a champion is overpowered and ruins the games because they win all the time, guess what? We nerf them. Our stance is that the gameplay of current live AD LeBlanc is bad for League of Legends, and so we want to heavily, heavily nerf it. Okay, so let's go line by line, and then we'll actually go into the numbers themselves on the sheet. So again, 1/3 less value from any further sources of bonus attack speed. Okay, great. Attack damage growth down by 0.8. My rubric right now for attack damage growth on a normal marksman is 0.5 AD growth is about 1% win rate. For AD LeBlanc, 0.8 AD growth should be, I would say, north of 1% win rate. I don't think it'll be 1.5 because she does rely on spells somewhat more than other champions might, other marksmen might, but she does, again, factor in very strongly with things like Trinity Force, which does care about her base AD, so this should be more than 1% win rate by itself to that kind of build. This should be a solid 1% win rate or more to this kind of build. Again, getting 1/3 less value out of attack speed scaling is a very big deal. And the mana growth stuff, so what I was talking about earlier with her falling out of line, most mages have about 25 mana growth. They have about 400 base mana and about 25 mana growth. This is default. This is like default mages. The ones I spot checked were Ahri and Xerath and Lux. They're all practically identical. Brand, I think, is also these numbers. The list goes on for a very long time. There are outliers like Kassadin, where we basically said Kassadin's mana pool is so big that even if you don't build all the mana items, you have enough mana to sustain your ulti. Cool. Kassadin is an outlier because he is a champion, is an outlier. I think Ryze is the same boat, where Ryze has a lot of base mana. He is an outlier. He is a mana mage. This is fine. LeBlanc is not this kind of champion. LeBlanc, like the other mages, should probably rely on Last Chapter and Ludens or whatever mana mythic you buy, because that was the entire intent of the entire reshape of supports get a bunch of mana regen, mid-lane mages get a bunch of level 1 mana, but then they don't have very much mana growth. You're meant to buy a mana item, and this whole system was built intentionally, and LeBlanc was outside the system for, I don't know the reasons. It's very easy to just go in at one point in time and say, LeBlanc is too hard to play. We're going to make her easier to play. We're going to give her more mana to make her gameplay more forgiving. This is logical in the short term, but over the course of time, if you make this change too many times, you get to the point where LeBlanc's mana growth is twice any other mage in the game. And it's like, oh shoot, what probably should have happened was the Q or W or E's mana cost should have gone down by 5 instead, and her mana pool should have been sacred. It's actually why I am personally a fan of templating some kinds of base stats, mana is one that I strongly believe in, because I really do believe mana should function much more similarly champion to champion. There are exceptions here, like, hey, we've decided that supports should be skewed toward mana regen to give them a suite of items that are support skewed because they give mana regen. Okay, there's an exception where there's a suite of mana regen champions. Okay, there's a really good reason why we do this, and we put them off to the side and we say, hey, they're different, their mana is different, hey, by the way. Sure, okay, fine. But if you're in a cohort of other mages, if you're not an exception like Catherine Arise, let's try to put you back in the box. This helps just everything be a little bit more balanceable as a system. I think that is really valuable to do. I think that's really wise. And so, bam, bring her back in the fold. The mana regen growth that matches other mages. The mana growth matches other mages. And we'll talk about what the actual impact here is. It's smaller than it looks on paper, but there's, of course, a lot of sticker shock here, and that is somewhat intentional. Now, we know that this means almost zero, not quite zero, but almost zero to AP LeBlanc. We know this means very, very little to AP LeBlanc. And honestly, this doesn't mean that much to AP LeBlanc either. Now, to be clear, these are actual nerfs to AP LeBlanc. She will use her attack damage some. She will auto-attack turrets, and that base AD matters when she's auto-attacking a turret. This extra mana towards the late game, this can matter. And, so she can run out of mana to cast spells at some point in time. This is certainly possible for her as a champion. This is a possibility, of course. So an AP ratio buff to the W, which, to be fair, helps her wave clear a little bit, weans her that little tiny bit off a static shiv, and can make up for some of the AD differences, and an AP ratio bump on E1. Essentially, I chose to give AP ratio buffs to the abilities that actually require some gameplay out of LeBlanc. This is not W forward into QR and snap back. There's no buff there. This is you have the W onto them that requires you to risk your body a bit. If they're Lysandra, they can stun you. If they're Leona, they can stun you, right? If there's Malzahar, he can ult you for sure. And the E, which requires you to land a skill shot. It's just the E1. It's the easier half of the E. E2 already has a really generous AP ratio. But these are buttons that LeBlanc can readily apply and use. That, like, this is appreciable because it is part of the combo, but it does require her to actually dedicate some gameplay. So trying to make sure that her damage is on the bigger gameplay buttons, not just on things like QR. Okay, let's go into the numbers themselves. So first things first, this is on the left is going to be the Shiv Triforce builds, where she basically scales towards about 63% bonus attack speed around here, and then doesn't get any more bonus attack speed. Basically, for solo laners, you're often not going to get all the way to 4 items, so I didn't bother to include Stormrazor as like a level 18 thing. And then over here is her current AP build, which does run an attack speed shard. So technically, yes, if you're running an attack speed shard, you are going to be a little bit lower on attack speed to the tune of about 3%. We could have further compensated her level 1 like base AS to be above 625. Could have gone like 0.64 or something, but I didn't want a change to read as a buff. I'm sorry that this is AP LeBlanc catching some strays. Again, there is some light compensation here, but, full disclosure, there was I would not be surprised if Luden's Echo Shadowflame LeBlanc lost some win rate this patch, but the intent is she's going to lose way more on an AD build. Again, the fact that you're going to scale less with attack speed means that she's going to have, right, you can see here, in the mid to late game, 10 to 13% less attack speed, fewer attacks per second. This is just your ability to auto-attack the turret, auto-attack an enemy champion, right? This is stacking your Trinity Force. This is auto-attacking with the Hullbreaker, with the Static Shiv, with the Triforce AS, with the eventual Stormrazor if you get to 4 items. Like, hey, it's, pretty quickly 10 to 13% fewer attacks. Just fewer total attacks come out. Okay. Next is LeBlanc's total AD. Of course, in an AD build, the percentage is going to be, not as bad. She's losing about 14 attack damage. Of course, 14 attack damage as a percentage is higher for a default mage compared to someone else. As far as his AD growth is concerned, this does put her in one of the lower categories. 3.0 is where Ari lives. 2.7 is on the low end. These are champions like Lysandra, or even champions like, I think, Kaisa, where they have like free on hit damage. So this does give LeBlanc among the worst AD in the game for a mage. Her level 1 AD is actually slightly high. We could have level 1 AD, but that would even further hurt current AP LeBlanc, so we didn't bother with level 1 AD that we could have. We could have really floored her AD. We chose not to because I think that would be probably too many strays caught. But you can see here that, like, by level 6, you are down 3 attack damage. Like, this is not trivial. This does mean something for this champion. This does have an impact. It'll be compensated a little bit by the AP ratio buffs to things like W and E, but this, again, to be clear, does have an impact on AP LeBlanc. Again, percentage-wise, it's not going to be as much for AD, but this is still, a solid, 7 fewer attacks, as well as, fewer attacks per second. And so then we go into the actual auto attack DPS, where AD LeBlanc, again, 10 to 17% less auto attack damage. Even with items coming in, even with you making it for this AD difference by buying a Trinity Force and a Static Shiv and a Storm Razor and a Hullbreaker. Again, Storm Razor is not actually accounted for in this chart. It's just the 3-item build. But yes, your actual DPS pretty quickly is down 17%. Your individual turret killing is 17% slower. This is definitely a meaningful hit. This is meant to be a large win rate swing against AD LeBlanc. She will feel this. This will matter. AP LeBlanc, of course, does lose some. Again, it's pretty much the exact same numbers as we had with the AD build, factoring the extra 3% loss in attack speed. This does matter some, to be clear. This definitely does. Keep in mind that your turret auto attack damage is going to be less bad than this, because as you get AP, I think it's 60% of your AP is turned into on-hit damage against turrets. And so in terms of auto-attacking enemy turrets, it's going to be much softer than this. It's going to actually look, weirdly enough, more like this in terms of AP LeBlanc's auto-attack the turret damage is going to be, not that bad. But again, yes, let's own up to it. It is going to be a bit lower. And so this brings us to the mana changes. Okay, so here is the base mana pool of AD LeBlanc versus LeBlanc with its right here, level 5 for Last Chapter, and level 9 for finishing Luden's Tempest. These are the breakpoints I chose. I realize that Mana Flow Band is a thing that people often run as well. I'm not including that here. I'm saying, hey, with or without Lost Chapter, what happens? With or without Luden's, what happens? And you can see that, yep, for AD LeBlanc, you do lose quite a bit of your mana pool. Your mana pool is now only 825 at 18. But the point here is that, yeah, if you lose a third of your base mana, it's going to be harder for you to cast this 100 mana W, keep it up forever. Again, Mana Flow Band exists, so the true nerf is going to be slightly softer than this. But say, yes, you are going to have real mana constraints, and this is like what a normal mage's mana pool looks like, by the way. But when you buy a Luden's Tempest, the nerf is much less severe. It's not quite so bad. Yeah, it's still there, right? It still matters, but you go from 25% less mana to 50% less mana. And so AP LeBlanc is going to feel this arguably less. We then say, hey, what is the difference in mana regen? It's down about 10 to 14% by mid to late game. So what is your total mana pool over the course of 4 minutes? This is just simply saying, with this is without Ludens. This is baseline mana without buying further items. So basically looking at AD LeBlanc, and AD LeBlanc's total mana pool while sitting out in the lane, resetting for 4 minutes, which is like functionally between Dragon Timers and resetting, walking back out, is again 20% less mana in the mid to late game as you're offside laning split pushing. This is softened with Mana Float a bit, and this is softened much more meaningfully with an item like Luden's Tempest. So that is sort of what's happening here. We move on to the AP ratio buffs. This is LeBlanc going basically 0 to 3 items. So technically LeBlanc's 3-item build, when it's a pure AP build, is most commonly Death Cap 3rd. Because Death Cap is such a spike, we can't do like clean interpolation from item 1 to item 3, and so it's a really sort of late game weighted AP ratio, is why you're seeing it be like 2% for a long time, then jump to 3, then jump to 4. Because I'm trying to like simulate the spike of Death Cap much later on. But here is the damage of W before and after the patch, and it's like not bad for a core damage tool. Hey, a core damage tool doing 3 to 4% more damage, or 2 to 4% more damage, not bad. And then your E does substantially more damage. E1, of course, is not a large part of your power budget, but that goes up somewhat as well. A very rough rule of thumb I have is that 1% more total damage is about 0.5% win rate. It's like in that ballpark. And now again, E is not a normal share of your damage. W is more reliably a normal share of your damage, but like if W plus E together is about half of AP LeBlanc's damage, this means we're somewhere in the world of LeBlanc does about 3% more damage. This is a roughly decent rule of thumb. And so if the end result is that, LeBlanc has, let's say, 3 to 4% more spell damage total, and that's where like almost all of our damage comes from, this should amount to a roughly 1.5, 1.7 maybe % win rate buff to LeBlanc in the AP ratios. Again, it might not be, and it could be that the mana changes are too big of a nerf, and that AP LeBlanc is not fully compensated. And honestly, these changes came on very short notice. This build popped out of nowhere. We chose to act instantly. We did not have a ton of time for testing validation. We think these are directionally good. I would like to take a longer look at LeBlanc and ensure that her base damages versus ratios are in a good spot, that we like what the gameplay is. I think QR poke is not ideal. I'd rather she commit her body, and that committing her body is worthwhile. This might mean that like Mimic R, Mimic W should be as good as Mimic Q or Mimic E or something, because it means that she has to actually land on you to do it, and she can't just, there's all kinds of things that are possible here as maybe the right choice. It is not an immediate backlog task, but it's something that, like, especially if LeBlanc is in a much worse state next patch on her AP builds, it's something that we will pick up. Like, we're going to have a meeting on Monday. It's called Reactive Balance, and it's like, hey, how did the patch we just shipped land? And it's like, ooh, Luden's first LeBlanc is a 45% win rate build. Okay, well, it's time for buffs. I will tell you personally, as someone very involved in that meeting and with submit access, I will not let AP LeBlanc be a 45% win rate champion. You have my promise that I will do my due diligence to see where this lands. And if AP LeBlanc sucks, I am sorry, because I'm the one who bricked your champion. I will do my best to make it right, okay? That is my promise to AP LeBlanc players out there. I am sorry if I screw up. Let's move forward, and let's talk about the rest of the bits of the patch. So Lee Sin is getting some changes. Again, Lee Sin is not winning a ton of games. He is an exciting pro play champion, certainly, but again, there really aren't any champions here we're buffing who are already very strong. The exception, I would argue, is Twitch, but I'd also argue Twitch is QOL. Though, of course, it is power positive. Ultimately, we are intending to buff Lee Sin, but we are aware that Lee Sin top and mid is actually already quite strong. So we made Lee Sin changes a while ago, which was converting Tempest into a total AD ratio, which is a change that I suggest that we do. The end result was, so I did the research coming in, and there was some win rate room between jungle Lee Sin and solo Lee Sin. I knew that buffing E would be a solo lane buff, disproportionate to jungle Lee Sin, but I wanted Lee Sin, since he's maxing E last anyway, to have the ability still matter and just gain some damage at the champion level. Because he could use some better laking, he could use another reliable button, just like, Lee Sin has the really flashy stuff with ward hops and the kicks and lane Q, but hey, if he has a reliable tool, he has like a baseline to rely on. And even if he doesn't have a bunch of gold, champion levels will buff the E. That's going to do something. And so I thought it was good for the champion, and he seems to be doing okay with that. But this meant we closed the gap between jungle Lee Sin and solo lane Lee Sin. So doing the research now for this patch, we identified that solo lane Lee Sin is already kind of at the win rate threshold of jungle Lee Sin. So we actually do have to do a compensation at lane Sin, because if top or mid Lee Sin comes and takes over, that's bad for the champion. Having to nerf jungle Lee because of lane Lee is not the state we want to be in, and so we're doing a preemptive change here that will not affect jungle Lee Sin until champion level 14, but will affect lane Lee Sin much earlier on. Anyway, the initial change is +2 base armor. It's bringing Iron Will's rank 1 value up to a decent level so that it can kind of feel good as a button press. And let's talk about what's going on overall with the numbers here. So jungle Lee Sin is going to get significantly more Omnivamp, especially until level 8, but then it kind of tapers off. And then, oh no, it's very, very slightly less. It's 1% less. Who cares? Level 13 onward, but of course, this is a strict buff to Lee Sin, I would argue, in the sense that this would gain him some win rate. +2 armor, of course, a win rate gain as well, probably under 1%. But it's like, yeah, this is a Lee Sin buff. And then, again, nerfing E because we have to, but overall, right, this is the kind of change that is going to be win rate positive to jungle Lee Sin. But for top Lee Sin, we saw, he's getting 2 armor and this to his W. This is disproportionately a top lane Lee Sin buff. That's probably not okay. And so we're taking 5 damage off the rank up of E and saying, yes, this ability needs to be a little bit weaker here, to the tune of the fact that it should be. And this will, be pretty meaningful. Yes, he's going to have some more Omnivamp. Yes, he's going to have better sustain. This will certainly matter some. We'll see what happens. My understanding is talking with a designer who had changed the W vamp earlier on and made it so bad at rank 1. What he had said was that it didn't have a very big impact. Reshaping it from bad at rank 1 and having to scale more sharply, that it didn't have actually very much impact in actually the lane versus jungle skew. And so that actually wasn't going to be that skewed of a lever. Just the fact that it's the ability that he maxes last means he's getting much more mileage out of it. And so that was going to, of course, disproportionately affect mid lane Lee Sin. I mean, the fact that current mid lane Lee Sin is able to leave the W at 5%, even though it 5x's by maxing it, clearly means that, mid lane top lane Lee Sin don't seem to need the extra Omnivamp. They don't seem to have to care. They'd rather have the E damage. And so, hey, E damage is something that's very precious to you. Well, congratulations, whatever becomes very precious to you, right? Okay. Moving forward to Lysandra, basically this is just saying, hey, our goal is to increase uniqueness. Our goal is to increase some matchup sharpness for Lysandra. She can be a natural LeBlanc counter. She can be just a cool, like, not necessarily weak side mid laner, but just, yeah, here's a mid laner whose goal is setup, whose goal is roaming, whose goal is, not being the carry, but doing something else. Let's give a different style of mid laner a chance here, right? Galio is somewhat this, Lysandra is somewhat this. Cool, we have some more supportive mids coming out that aren't raw supports, but are supportive. Seems good. Again, good into melee champions, LeBlanc, Physicali being mentioned by name. And so, yeah, flat 15 0.15 root duration is not going to be a huge amount of power, but I think it's a really cool lever, and I'm glad we're sort of trying to amp uniqueness somewhat in this patch and some recent ones. So next one is a big buff to AP Nunu. I think our appetite right now for AP Nunu win rate is about plus 2%. I don't know if we're hitting it exactly with this change. This is a very big bump, to be clear. It's 50% more AP ratio on his E, which is the ability that he maxes second. This gives it a potential total AP ratio of 1.35 for all snowball, or 2.15 if you land all snowballs and the root. The maximum AP ratio of E is now quite high. It is a bit higher than W, but of course it requires much more than W. It is a bit lower than R, but of course it is. R requires a full channel, but it now puts the AP ratio somewhere in, like, a pretty good spot. This is like a pretty acceptable AP ratio for a very hard to land the entirety of skill. So yeah, simple AP ratio buff. What can I say? So here is the result. This is just if you hit 3 snowballs, and that's it, just and you hit the guy, and you're building from 9 to about 410 ability power, which is like stat shard, and then sort of interpolating all the way towards 300 builders include death cap. It's okay, a pretty decent amount of damage for just the triple hit. Okay, great. Solid, but again, this is like 15 to 20% more damage on this ability is a lot for, just one ability going up. Now, again, as far as the percentage of power budget, is it more or less than 1/4 of his total damage? I would say E might be 1/4 of his total damage. Okay, well, if 1/4 of his total damage is going up by 16%, that means the champion is doing 4% more damage. We get about 2% win rate, right? That's kind of what it looks like here. And if you land the entire ability, and it's I land 6 strikes, or like I land all 9 strikes and then the E pops, it's going to look more like this. In the real world, it's actually going to be a little bit lower than this, because you're not going to land all 9 strikes in one target. You might hit one person and then one person and then one person, and then the unchanged AP ratio on the back end of E, right, the damage removing enemy, that part didn't change. And so much more the real world application of Nunu is actually going to be a smaller percentage than this. It's actually going to be more like, the total throughput of E is like 8% more damage, right? And if E is still, again, only 1/4 your damage, then this might only be 1% win rate to AP Nunu. We'll have to see, of course, right? But it's like, hey, we haven't 1.5x out of AP ratios before, and we'll know pretty reliably what was the power level increase of this change. And if we're like, well, we want to give AP Nunu 2% win rate, and this gave him 1%, so, okay, we can go somewhere else for another 1% win rate. I would say it's probably the Q. It's probably Q damage, I would say, and then we can give him that and say, cool, this is sort of a win rate we're comfortable with. Essentially, I think it's important that AP Nunu has a generically lower win rate than Tank Nunu. Yes, I realize the AP Nunu build is very popular. That's great, but I think it's important to not betray the champion's core fantasy. And say, like, yes, Nunu is a tank. If he is a tank, he will be strong. And if you want to play him as a mage, you can. He will be okay. I think that is a very reasonable sort of structure for the champion. Next, we have unfortunately had to drag our heels a bit on Pyke changes. We had Pyke as a buff candidate many, many times. He kept getting sort of punted out because there was a set of patches where we moved a bunch of other support balance levers around, and so like when we nerfed like a bunch of support items, like that might have gave Pyke some power, and then we did some updates to various lethality items that might have given Pyke some power. And so we kept saying, well, we could address Pyke, but we're gonna, we kept having patches that hit Pyke systemically. And honestly, if we were on top of this more, we could have been like, okay, well, we measured the results of this patch, Pyke is still weak, go. And we probably could have done this 5 months ago. To be honest, we probably could have buffed Pyke 5 months ago. It would have been fine. We are finally doing it now. We probably were a bit late on this. This is our bad. But it's some pretty simple stuff. I mean, Pyke is not in a terrible spot. He's just slightly weak. This is some health growth, which is a generic. Here you go. Have some stats. One thing that Pike players have complained about is that they feel like they fall off. Just giving him some more baseline durability to survive like game team fights, get a bit more space to e forward or the chance to do a reset. Again, this is not a huge change, right? Support Pike doesn't gain a ton of levels. That is a tap towards okay Pike, because then you literally can't use health as health. It just converts out. Here's a little bit more baseline durability. You can maybe withstand a little bit better. Other thing here is that W max second is not super far behind E max second in power level, and so opening up an alternative build path of Q max into W max instead, you get more mobility. You get to duck into stealth to regen a bit more often. You get to roam on the map a little more quickly. Like, hey, there's some value in a different build like this, and so hey, here's a bit of power on this button. Again, it's not huge. I'm expecting that Pike gains probably a bit under 1% win rate, to be honest, but it's directionally, I think they're both good changes. Again, the ability to have different possible skill orders like is very good for any given or for most champions. There are going to be exceptions where some just skill orders are just like disallowed. This is like there isn't the gameplay to support it. But overall, right, some decent changes here. We do have the data table on Pike's health, and it's something. Again, it's some power. If he were a soul laner, this would be 1% win rate outright, but it's probably going to be a little bit under that because he's not going to gain the same number of levels as other champions. That said, health growth compared to other laners is a much bigger deal for him because he can't get health any other ways. So maybe it is 1%. We'll see. Rek'Sai is getting a really, really big nerf this patch. She was already a strong performer ever since the 13.11 update. We've had to nerf her several times, and unfortunately, these changes were never big enough. We never said, okay, we're going to swing on Rek'Sai really hard. We're just going to nerf her enough that she's not going to be the number one problem, because Rek'Sai has been so elite skewed that like she's presently like I think 54% win rate jungler in Masters Plus and sub 50 for like 75% of league players. Like, it's so extreme, and it's like she's actually like, I don't want to say objectively bad. Some of this is Rek'Sai has a very steep mastery curve, and some of this is that Rek'Sai is so early game skewed that both you and your teammates have to be good enough at closing out games for her to be a successful champion. And in lower skilled play, people are worse at controlling objectives, worse at vision control, worse at closing out games. The games run longer, and so Rek'Sai natively just can't hold up in lower elo games because of the shape of those games. And it's like, I feel bad whenever that's like, I'm okay if a champion has innate win rate by MMR because of mastery requirements. This is champions like Azir. Because like, yeah, like you just got to get better at the champion. But it always feels bad when you're a champion who's an early game champion, but you can't convert it into you being a late game carry because your scaling kind of sucks. And it's like, well, I did it right. I got my Fiora 4 kills, but unfortunately my Fiora doesn't know how to play with a lead, and so I lose anyway. And like, I always feel bad when people get stuck in that world. And some of this we just can't fix because to a certain degree, we want champs with different win rate curves. Like, we want there to be different champs. We're like, here's Graves. He's going to turn into a carry jungler late game, and his early game is like, well, I can counter jungle you, but my ganks are mediocre. Here's Rek'Sai. She's the best ganker in the game, and she falls off a cliff. And, right, it's fine in general, directionally, to have all these different shapes, but I do always feel bad when it's like there's a large suite of players who just like, well, they're not allowed to play a champ because their champion like kind of doesn't function in the last 10 minutes of the games they tend to play, because even if they got their teammates ahead, their teammates couldn't use the lead well enough because the games are too sloppy. That's sort of preamble, and it's why every single time we've done Rek'Sai changes, and I've ended up shipping most of them this year, not the 13.11 update, but like most of the individual balance changes post that. I've tried to be like, well, I nerfed you, but I give you something back late game so that in those silver games where your teammates can't close the game out, you've got a bit more agency. It's like churning Rek'Sai Q and E into total AD says, well, you at level 15 have a stronger Q and E than you did before, so you can rely on yourself a little bit. But ultimately, it's meant that we've never really come through and gotten elite MR Rek'Sai into a balanced state. She's always been too good. And with the Stridebreaker buff, she got pushed back over the edge, and so it's like, look, I'm just going to take a much larger swing. We're going to try to have to not revisit this in terms of requiring nerfs. I think there is, a candidate for Rek'Sai getting some patchwork updates where we can give her a more complete gameplay pattern late game. But that is not on the top of our backlog, though it is certainly something that I think has value in looking at. Maybe we'll get to it. I would like to. All right, this kind of thing where it's like we have limited man hours, though I would like to make an update here. Okay, so what are we doing? Well, we are nerfing, weirdly enough, the late game of Rek'Sai's passive heal. It's a flat 10, and then the max health percent grows with time. Overall, I think lowering the amount of passive healing is a top lane nerf more than a jungle nerf. Top lane Rek'Sai also is very scary of breaking a lot of win rate bans and a pretty frustrating pick overall. I think this is disproportionately a top lane nerf, and probably deservedly so. Next thing is just a simple early game nerf to Queen's Wrath up until champion level 9. You know, you're going to do less damage out of your Q. We almost went for this one when the total AD conversion happened, and we were afraid that was going to be too much win rate magnitude. Ultimately, now we can go for it. Going to make this change here. So this is an early game nerf. This is a late game nerf. Burrow move speed is going down by a very, very large amount. I think actually the correct version of Burrow Unburrow. I think Rek'Sai's base move speed should go up by 5, and then burrowing shouldn't give more move speed. I think Rek'Sai is, when default fighting, is actually slow for a fighter. She's only 335. Most fighters are 340. I think Rek'Sai deserves 5 base move speed. And if like if we hit nerfs way too hard here, and Rek'Sai like actually sucks. It's like, cool, we can give Rek'Sai power in interesting ways that is cool, and we can like kind of build her back up. I'm totally fine with that, right? But anyway, in the current live version of Rek'Sai, she is just the fastest champion in the game passively while burrowed. This just to me is too much. I think it breaks too many rules. I mean, she's like 10 flat move speed higher than Master Yi or Pantheon or anyone else in the game. And 5 higher at 11, and like tied with the fastest champions of the game at 6. Like from very early on, she's just the literal fastest champion in the game. And like I think she even outpaces Rel to a certain degree, like out of combat Rel in horse form. So just to me, like this is just too extreme. Like these numbers are just simply too high, and just these are things that I just feel like are a little bit illegal about this champion. That I think we can unwind and make her a bit more fair overall. And then, again, just like the little minor random make good. The only thing on W's rank up is unburrow damage. The only thing his entire ability is 15 base damage. That is horrible. It being 35 base damage is still bad, but at least this is how much damage Prey Seeker. Like, hey, Rek'Sai Q gives you Prey Seeker damage to the tune of 35 damage per rank. It also gives you Prey Seeker cooldown. It also gives you Queen's Wrath cooldown. It also gives you Queen's Wrath damage. Unburrow gave you less than half of what Prey Seeker gives you on rank up. It's like, there's also value in trying to make the W rank up better. I don't know what we would even lock behind this. I don't know if there actually is room for this. It might be that this ability just doesn't need to work this way. But, a random thing where it's like, dude, her last max is really, 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 really bad. And it could become playable. Like this could be the, unburrow, knock-up, lockout cooldown. There's all kinds of things that could be here. But, her last max is horrible. And it's like, we can make this only bad. It can be only very bad instead of horrible. It's an improvement at least to go to very bad. But these are obviously really big changes. We can talk about the math behind them. So here is, without any runes or anything, the base damage of Rek'Sai Q. It is down 12% at level 1. It is eventually the same at level 9. Here's with a stat shard as she slowly grows toward a full build. Again, the percentage is not going to be any different, but the total flat damage of the ability itself. It's an ability that has an attack reset and deals 57 damage in an AoE. I think that is still above the bar for what a level 1 spell is allowed to do. It deals 60 damage in an AoE and gives you an attack reset on a short cooldown. Cool. I think this is fine. This is a level 1 spell is allowed to do this much damage. Of course, again, it just kind of scales and scales and scales, and because it's total AD, it's gonna innately move up. And as the bonus AD ratio is pretty good, it's gonna innately move up as well. So it scales with time. But yes, a strong hurt to early game Rek'Sai clear speed and early game dueling. Next is the baseline heal of the champions. This is if you buy 0 bonus health, if your build is entirely full lethality. Here is the amount of health that you get back from a full Fury bar before and after. Notice that it is pretty heavily nerfed towards the late game, but early game is not a big difference. You learn Burrow at 2. Your level 2 healing is about the same. Level 3 healing is technically slightly higher. The old version of Burrow jumped every 3 levels, and the new version of Burrow jumps linearly, so it's why you're seeing these spiky numbers. I'm not a fan of things that you have no control over having spiky numbers, at least spiky numbers that you have to care about. So for example, Aatrox's Aatrox's Q minion mod scales at 6, 11, and 16. I'm more okay with 6, 11, 16 because they are obvious breakpoints of power where you rank your ulti and you're like, I have clearly hit a power spike. and you don't think, I would say, that hard about things like your minion mod and whatnot. And so I don't think it's that big of a deal that it's not smooth sailing. I think it's like kind of reasonable. It's okay that it works this way. But meanwhile, something like, oh, how useful and reliable is my Rek'Sai passive? How much heal am I getting out of this one? The fact that it could more than double, I'm personally don't love. And so I chose to smooth this out because I think it makes for a cleaner experience where you don't get randomly like, the secret level 4 Rek'Sai healed twice as much power spike. And it's not a huge deal, right? It's, I'm healing for a total of 38 more health. Who really cares? And like, again, it's not actually a very, very large deal. I want to be really honest about that one. It's just the kind of thing where I like to smooth things out when I can. When it makes sense to do so. And so while I was here, this is the change that I made. This is accounting for Rek'Sai's normal build on live, which is Stridebreaker into Black Cleaver, and then it's like Death Dance GA, so she stops getting bonus health around like here. Somewhere around here is when I stop scaling the bonus health. And of course, you don't build your Kindle Gem until like much later on around here. And so it's, much like the live values with no bonus health, and then bam, at level 7 we see a Ruby Crystal, then a Kindle Gem, and then we finish Stridebreaker, and then like here's Ruby Crystal and a Kindle Gem and a Black Cleaver, and then on and on and on. But you can see that because the flat damage got nerfed, the flat healing got nerfed by a lot, and the percent health damage didn't get, or the percent health healing didn't get nerfed by as much, you can see that it is relatively softer of a nerf, though of course still, yes, you are healing only about 2/3 as much as you were in the old patch. This is a very large nerf to Rek'Sai healing, to be clear. I want to point out, though, that compared to 13.10, it is still better at almost all points in time, right? Here's the data table of expected live healing values. Here is what it was back in 13.10, and aside from the very early game, Rek'Sai still does have more healing than she used to. The end result is that indeed Rek'Sai healing is better than it was back in the day. So it's not, I'll say relatively absurd numbers that it used to be. It's, good numbers, better than it used to be for most of the game, and I think that's totally reasonable to do. Finally, what is the total move speed of Rek'Sai well burrowed? Again, it used to be 350 to 365, and now it's 340 to 350. 350 is still a more than reasonable move speed for a champion. She has tunnels. She has ways of getting around the map pretty quickly. She has ways of engaging. I don't think she needs to have the literal highest move speed in the game. And so I took this away from her. And then finally, the just amount of damage you can deal, expecting a 4 item build by late game. Cool. Unburrowing has a appreciable amount of damage. Congratulations. This button is obviously it's still a knockup, but still some CC is still some damage. But hey, there's at least a slightly more decent rank up here. You're not going to go to WMAX second. It's not going to happen here. But cool, a more decent rank up here. Next thing is Renekton losing 4 MR. This is just saying, look, a lot of champions, if they are really, really quite omnipresent in pro play and challenger, often means that they don't have sharp enough matchups to be counterable. And so this is trying to open up a sort of different tactic here, which is say, hey, Renekton is going to be nudged towards having some weaker matchups, champions like Gwen and Rumble, or maybe Kennen, where yes, Renekton is going to have low MR in the early game. He might have some opening for weaker. He might be weaker into AP champs. We open up this as a slightly, different possible matchup table. Also, things like Ornn and Malphite deal magic damage largely as well. So even some of the magic damage tanks can look pretty decent here. As they'll be a little bit better at fighting back against Renekton. Not that they're going to probably win. I think he can drain tank them still, but it does a little something. I think that's valuable. So I'm going to say here he's going to have about 3% less health with magic damage at most points in time. Small buffs to Syndra, 5 flat damage on Q is not much to write home about. You can notice, though, that the AP ratio per base damage, right? 300 AP is 210 damage. This is the kind of, aggressive AP ratio you want. I mentioned it earlier with LeBlanc. 300 low is okay, this is a solid, relatively aggressive, mage AP ratio to base damage. As I mentioned earlier with LeBlanc, a lot of hers are really, it's 300 high, in some cases even 400 for some of her abilities to double what the rank 3 damage of the ability is. And so, Syndra has respectable AP ratios. That's good. She scales well off gold. Okay, great. But yeah, bumping up her ability to be a lane bully because I think it's a cool, unique niche that, not so unique, but it's a cool niche for Syndra to have that, yep, she's going to go bombard you with Qs and try to be a bully there. Next is Twitch. This is certainly going to be power. The hope here is that it's, QOL first, and then of course it is some level of power. The bar changes in the previous patch ended up being a lot of QOL. It gave him a ton of pick rate. People were excited to play him, and it ended up being all that much power overall. So it was a really big win for perception, and we had the power bit to spare with him. Twitch is already a reasonably strong champion. This definitely will also be some win rate because landing your ult shots will matter. This could be as much as 1.5% win rate. This could be a very, very big deal. But ultimately, The goal here is that some degree of Twitch R should be unreliable. You can distortion it, you can flash it, you can, in some cases run away with really, really fast move speed. Powerball can dodge it, but dodging it on accident should happen less than it does right now. So we increase missile speed in R to say, look, you are going to land more of your bolts in general. Have fun. You're going to feel better. This will be a good amount of power. We'll see how much it actually is, but it's the kind of thing that I think we should be willing to modify more often, which is, well, it's hard to know what the exact win rate magnitude is here, but it's a change that we think is going to feel good for the champion. We'll go feels first, and then if we need to nerf some random AD ratio or bonus AD or something on Twitch, we can do that and it's fine. Zeri loses 5 move speed. Not much to say. This champion already has a bunch of bonus move speed with the R. She has really, really long dashes with the E. Zeri does not need to have above baseline move speed. The theory I heard that I actually quite like, which is 330 should be the baseline, like the average move speed for a marksman. And then it should be lower if you have extreme target access. These are champions. I don't even know if they are all 325, but like, or just champions where like it's abusive if it's not. These are champions like Caitlyn or Ezreal or Ashe or Jinx, where it's like, yeah, they outrange basically everyone, or they perma-slow you, or something else. They just, of course, they should be slower than average. They should be the slow marksman. And there's some champs, like arguably Sivir, where it's like your target access isn't very good, you're short ranged, it's hard for you to keep up, you don't have ways of locking them down. You should be 335 because it's hard for you to have target access. Like, it's meant to be easier for you to reach people. And yes, you're going to be better at kiting, but you're also shorter range, so that Darius doesn't have to close as much of a gap on you or whatever. And Zeri, to me, is not, in the Sivir-esque camp. She doesn't have to be at really, really close ranges, and she does have lots of pretty reliable movement tools. So yeah, 330 like makes sense as where she's supposed to be. I think it's a good change. I think it's sort of directionally correct for Zeri and for the League of Legends roster as a whole. So then we move on to some item updates. I did the item updates in this patch. I did the item updates from the several previous patches. I actually really like taking into systems like this. So first up is Rhino's Omen is 10% cheaper. This item is just underpowered and should be able to serve a purpose. Part of the reason for doing this is that obviously, we're aware that Tristana mid is a pretty high priority champion. She was throughout everyone's postseason, but none of the top 4 leagues played on the patch where Tristana's base health and base MR went down. So we don't have a reliable read on how strong she really is in a pro play meta that is dominated by magic damage champions typically. Talia, Ahri, Azir, etc. Syndra coming in probably as well. I know Syndra is quite good in Tristana, for example. But what I do know is that double crit marksman compositions should be weak to an item like Randuin's Omen. Randuin's Omen kind of sucks. So here's Randuin's Omen's sort of fake gold efficiency in 18 versus 13.19. So, here's the gold value of health and the gold value of armor. And using Rock Solid by just porting it forward from Warden's Mail, because you get this exact passive for, I believe it's 200 gold when you upgrade Warden's Mail. That's the gold efficiency and the gold value of the item. So congratulations, you pay 200 gold for Rock Solid, and this item is 82% gold efficient through these stats. You then get for your other 500 gold, crit resilience, and the humility active. Humility is the short duration slow. Okay, this gives you something for 500 gold. And so now Randuin's, you're only paying like 250 gold for it. All right, it's a buff, of course. Sure, great. Well, what I wanted to really do is compare it to the other armor items in the game. So Frozen Heart, instead of health armor in Rock Solid, has ability haste armor in Rock Solid. And would you believe it? Look at that gold efficiency, 94%. And then instead of crit resilience and humility, it's the Winter's Approach, whatever. It's instead of 30% less damage from crits, it's 20% less attack speed, even if they're not a crit user, even if they're not attacking you. So probably a much stronger unique passive here. And then 400 mana, which we're not like counting as like baseline value, but sure, you can debate whether you think the active from humility is better than having some mana and fixing mana issues on a tank, but whatever. The point is, this shape looks a whole lot more fair, right, of post-buff Randuin's Omen and efficiency and what you're getting out of the item. And the reason why I've mentioned a couple times that I don't really like gold efficiency, like it's there as a decent stand-in for like let's measure stuff, but it falls apart pretty quickly because you can't really gold efficiency things like crit resilience and Winter's Approach, but you can compare an item to another item. So like, hey, Randuin's Omen now looks like it's shaped up and it's like balanced about as well as Frozen Heart is. We're getting, more similar effects, more similar numbers of stats for a more similar amount of gold, it's a bit easier to compare. Sunfire Aegis, similar build, where, hey, I upgrade a mythic, or I upgrade an epic, I upgrade Balmy Cinder. Balmy Cinder has baseline 15 damage on it because, right, it has 12 base damage, 1% bonus health, under your health item. Balmy Cinder comes with 15 damage per second. It has some health, it has some armor, and this means that Sunfire Aegis is kind of, if you don't think about it too hard, it combines from a total of 2,700 gold. It costs 2,700 gold, and it's kind of 2,500 gold worth of stuff, which is much like Randuin's, much like Frozen Heart. Hey, look, these items all make sense. And what else does Sunfire Aegis give me? Well, it gives me even more immolate damage. It gives me another 8.75 damage if I have no other runes or anything else. It gives me, 50% more immolate, but also this ramps over time. So even if I'm only on one item, I can in fact gain another 23 damage. I can actually, 2.5x my Balmy Cinder. And so it's like, oh yeah, so what I'm getting is, another 1 to 3 to as I buy more items, more hundreds and hundreds of gold of value. And it's like, yeah, this is in the ballpark of things like the attack speed aura and the crit resilience. This is, yes, Randuin's Omen looks like it's now shaped appropriately compared to these other armor items. This starts to look fair. And so that's kind of the point here. It's like, yeah, honestly, Randuin's felt really out of line. You weren't really getting what you were paying for. You were just forking out an arm and a leg for like nebulously valuable stuff. Like, if you didn't need the mana, you'd probably just rather have the attack speed aura than this stuff with how poorly statted and priced old Randuin's Omen was. So Randuin's as an outlet for double crit teams, cool. If you're going to go play Triss with Ziggs bot, go for it. You've built like a real team comp, go for it. But if you're going to play double crit marksman, Randuin should be good enough that you say, well, I'm going to play Cyan or Orin or Malphite, and I'm going to tank your team. Good luck with that, with Talia jungle being your only damage output. It's not going to happen. So I think this is wise. I think this is a good change that helps the game. Next is Seeker's Armguard. This item is just kind of bad. Again, it is also somewhat driven by Tristana mid, saying, look, there should be a good systemic outlet for AD mids. This is also going to help solo queue a lot, where mages should feel like they have viable options that feel good against Zed and Yasuo and Yone and all the other AD champs in the mid lane, in the way that AD champs feel good about Hexdrinker in the mid lane when they're up against Syndra or Akali or Silas or something. Like, this item should be good enough that it feels like it's worth buying. And so here is Seeker's Armguard before and after. The item wasn't even gold efficient on stats. And of course, with bonus armor, it would get there, of course, but this to me still felt like it was kind of unreasonable. It should be like that. There we go. And similar here. Cool. Great. Right, but again, the item relatively inefficient until you stacked it up, and you had the honor of stacking up to like kind of some stats. It was okay, but comparing it to new Armguard to Hexdrinker, again, Hexdrinker just comes out of the box with efficient stats, and it comes with a 6 shield that even at the minimum value, and by the way, you can't really get like a 110 point shield because it's a level 1, so we can go for like 170, which is like champion level, I think it's champion level 7 here, so let's go 150, right? Champion level 5, and it's 400 gold worth of health, which, wow, 140% gold efficient Hexdrinker. Well, 135% gold efficient Armguard. Like, these seem like they're more reasonable and comparable. And again, these aren't really apples to apples. A conditional shield is not the same thing as permanent armor that you have to wait to stack up to. There are going to be plenty of times where they pop your Hexdrinker and it turns off and nothing happens because you took 1 magic damage, and then it's on cooldown and they kill you later. At least in Armguard, you're always going to have, well, once you finish stacking it, that 35 armor. So it's not a good direct comparison, but I just think the underlying baseline value of this item is just low and deserves the buff. Finally, a simple nerf of Static Shiv. The intent with 13.18 was to go power neutral, or slightly down. Honestly, if Static Shiv is the 3rd most popular Noon Quiver item, that's probably fine. It's still going to make sense on Quinn. It'll make sense on Vayne. Okay, great. Congratulations. That's awesome. Right, the champs who want some help getting wave clear can get some wave clear. But honestly, Stormrazor was too weak for too long. We could have buffed it much, much sooner, and I should have never buffed Shiv's wave clear from when it first launched, and because the item was underpowered, I should have given it stats instead. So that was my mistake by raising its minion damage instead of just leaving it where it was, or maybe lowering it, because in testing the minion damage was fine, and then I kept raising it because it was weak, because I refused to increase the stats initially or the PvP damage initially, and that was just the wrong direction. So I could have shortcutted a lot of this heartache by just saying, yep, the minion damage is roughly appropriate. The 8 ratio, of course, should have gone away on it. But yeah, this should hopefully make it into a pretty reasonable item and do the right things. And it incrementally helps your wave clear. Okay, great. Let's move on. I'm going to scroll down to a couple of bug fixes that I am pretty sure I shipped in this patch, and so I want to bring them up because I find talking about how bug fixes happened to be very interesting, and so I'm scrolling down until I can find it. There's a lot of Briar stuff here. Okay, so first up was first strike changes. So these two actually already worked correctly. There was a bug outstanding that had 3 bugs, which is first strike didn't grant gold for abilities that killed, or damage that was dealt to shields, or that damage dealt toward the end of first strike didn't actually give you gold. These actually had already gotten fixed, but we closed the ticket out, and so they're listed here. So this was basically, there's not a really important story to tell here. Basically, the way it worked was whenever you dealt damage, first strike would like fire a missile, and when that missile fired, it would like store like how much damage it dealt to the champion, and then the missile would come back to you. You would deal damage, right? And then you would fire a missile out towards the enemy champion. And then when the missile hit, it would go deal bonus damage. And then when it dealt that damage, it would then increment a variable on your character that said, hey, here's how much damage I've dealt, so you can do some bookkeeping, so you can track it, so you can give yourself bonus gold when the buff ends. And the buff just says, like, so like the like 5-second window where first strike is active, that buff says, okay, when I end, take this number, how much gold I have earned, add that to my gold, and then zero yourself out. And the way it would work is that essentially any damage you dealt late, that missile's still in flight, the math is all done to give you some gold, and then it gets zeroed out, and the gold goes nowhere. So essentially all this really does is say, I just moved the gold earning logic, because the missile already knows how much damage it's supposed to deal. I just said, look, let's not do the gold incrementing on the missile. Let's just have the gold increment happen when you launch the missile, but do all the math and storage on the buff itself. Don't have the missile go do it. And then the missile can go deal its damage. That's going to work no matter what. If your buff is gone, it doesn't matter. It's going to do its job. But now your character variable is going to store your damage correctly. It's going to store your would-be gold. And now when the buff ends, it has the numbers correctly. So you're just moving some logic around, but fix that bug. There was one more that I thought was actually really interesting as well. Yes, this one. This one was really fun. Okay. So Rift Herald could charge the same turret twice if the original turret was destroyed. So this one took a little while to figure out. Okay, I'm gonna try to explain the logic of the AI of Rift Herald. Okay, so every quarter second, Rift Herald asks, "Am I in range of a targetable turret?" If I am, and my character variable flag says I'm allowed to charge, then I want to go cast the spell Herald Charge. Okay, great. So far, so good. The spell Herald Charge is not actually the charge. The Herald Charge just does this. That's the spell. That's it. That's the entire spell. It's an animation. It lasts about 4 seconds. That's the entire spell. That's all it does. That's the actual spell itself. The logic says when you start casting this spell, I want you to take the variable, right? So when you start casting the spell, I want you to take the variable, which is the target. I want you to take your turret target, and I want you to get its location, okay? The second you start it, get the location of the turret you're targeting, face me to it, and then in 2 seconds, I want you to charge me at my target. Okay? Okay. And now that you've done this, you need to set your flag to you've already charged. Okay? So I cast a spell, the spell does this. That's literally all it does. But when you start the spell, it runs out of logic saying face my turret. In 2 seconds, move me in this direction. Move me over this course of time in this direction. Stop here. While I'm charging, damage things around me. This could be champions, this could be minions, it could be turrets. Do different damage for each one. Of course, if they're a champion, knock them back. Make me untargetable. And then at the end of the movement, stop. Okay, great. Turrets say, when I die, look for Rift Herald around me, and tell Rift Herald, hey, Shelly, you're allowed to charge again. So you might already know now what's happening here. So if you summon Rift Herald between outer and inner turret, Shelly goes, I see a turret. I turn over, I play the animation, And in 2 seconds, I'm going to charge at my target. Now, the funny thing is, the logic for charge at my target is basically 2 seconds later. When a turret dies, the unit disappears from the game. The unit no longer exists the instant a turret dies. You actually like can't really target turret rebel as far as I know. Azira's passive is weird, by the way. This is also, by the way, why Heimer's passive doesn't work against turret rebel. Of course, we could like, make a workaround, but like, hey, by the way, it's not easy, but we could of course do it. So what was happening was every quarter second forever, Shelly said, like, if as long as I have a charge available, find something around, right? As long as I have a charge available, as long as I have not been told that I'm charging, look for a target, look for a target, look for a target. And it goes, okay, I see outer turret, I'm gonna charge at you. And so it goes, I'm gonna charge at you, I'm gonna charge at you, and normally it would go rah into the turret and deal damage. What would happen on live, we're gonna pantomime this, here we go, all right? Shelly goes, all right, I'm ready, and then moonwalked backwards into a different turret. Shelly moonwalked backwards onto mid lane tier 2, did like one auto attack, and then goes, I'm ready to charge again, and then slammed mid lane tier 2. Wait, what? Why are you doing this, Shelly? What's going on? So you might be able to understand the logic flow here already of what's weird about this. So what happened is she's in the middle of her charge animation, and then for 2 seconds it says, okay, now find me my turret target and go fly at them. Well, the first turret's dead, and the second turret is now targetable. And that logic, that every quarter second logic, because the first turret died, it freed up Shelly. She's back to I'm allowed to charge, which means her logic is now running for find me a target. Which means the back half of the spellcast logic, which says, now go send me towards my target, she's found a new target. She found a new target and moonwalks back to mid lane tier 2. And as far as Shelly's concerned, she hasn't charged anymore because that charge didn't count. That charge got reset back to 0, so her charge is ready because it gets set to 1 when she starts the charge, gets set to 0 when the turret dies, but doesn't get set back to 1 when she charges. That would be weird. That would conflict with like your charge killing the turret in the first place. Like it shouldn't do that. And so her charge was ready. She was close to a targetable turret, so she charges a second time. Of course. Of course that makes sense. Why wouldn't it? And so I'm like, okay, well, I know how to fix this. What I'm going to do is basically just say, all right, look, you have a different variable for not just like, I have a charge available, I don't have a charge available. There's a different variable for I am actively charging. And for the entire like rearing up and then flying and then landing, that variable can be stored as like 1 or 0 of I am actively in my charge animation. So, oh, okay. I'm just going to go back to your target selection logic and say that if you are actively charging, run none of this. Don't give me a new target if you are actively charging. And so, okay, so I try this, and what happens is Shelly has mid lane turret there, and she's like, I'm going to charge you, And she kills the turret, and she goes, I'm going to charge. And then starts walking towards mid lane tier 2. And it's like, that's not what I wanted. Finish your damn charge. And that's when I realized that turrets disappear from the game entirely. They are no longer units when they die. So when Shelly says, face my target, start animating, she finds turret 1. At the end, when it says, okay, now go charge your target, she goes, what target? I don't have a target. The unit's gone. I can't get its location. I can't get where to go. I don't know how far away it is. There is no unit. I'm not going anywhere. It's like, okay, shoot. So at the end of the day, all I really had to do, once I realized all of this, was just like, take the logic and say, look, stop searching for a new unit. Just when you face your target, just save that target, save that location. Because what it was doing is saying like, get the target, whatever. And then it was like checking it, functionally like checking again in a different way for the location. Because it was basically just saying like, okay, well now at the end, once again, grab my target from my targeting selection parameters and charge it. And it's like, okay, let's only save this once. Let's save it at the start. Save this unit, never overwrite it. Stop running the logic. Don't overwrite my target selection. Just say I'm going to charge at you. I'm saving you as the location. I've saved the location that even a unit dies. I have a location saved. And now when the charge goes to complete, it says, oh, I've saved this XY coordinate location. I'm going to charge there. And so now Shelly, if she starts the charge, will just always charge at the turret. If you bard ult it, if it dies, if you do whatever, if she starts the animation, she will just smack the rebel. And she will still get the flag back to 0. A turret has died in your view. You've got your charge again. She'll walk to tier 2. She'll start the charge. She'll play it normally. So figuring out all the weird things there, I finally got there, but just like, so anyway, yeah, now if Shelly starts the animation, she will always follow through with the charge, even if it's rubble. I think that makes total sense. I think it's reasonable. She'll reset back to having a charge available. She'll walk to mid tier 2. She'll keep going from there. All normal stuff. So there's my animated explanation of rescripting Shelly charge. Cool stuff. All right, so we can go for patch 13.19 TLDR. Let's get into it. Azir lowering just his early laning phase safety a bit, trying to make sure he can't fight back nearly as well against some lane bullies, especially ranged ones where he actually wants to reposition his minions. Very light touch here, but again, just trying to open up some laning phase weaknesses to Azir. Briar, very, very light touch here for the base stats. I think the bigger thing is the overall healing profile of Snack Attack and the overall clear speed and monster destruction speed of W. This is actually a pretty big deal here. This will slow her clear speed quite a bit. And especially since you max W first, it'll lower her sustain pretty meaningfully here as well from the W active. So pretty meaningful hit here. Overall, I think she's still going to be very, very strong. We will probably have to do follow-up nerfs at some point, but still directionally good to bring this champion down in the short term. Galio, very, very light buff. There shouldn't be a lot of win rate, but more ults means he can be more mobile around the map, and though he's still going to be a relatively weak laner, that is pretty much intended, and instead, he will sack waves, but he will be able to go and help his team more often. Gangplank is able to go help his team more often as well, plus 2 of his upgrades are very weak, and so they're being bumped up to be a little bit more considerable, though still not amazing. They're probably still not as good as Fire at Will, but bringing up their power level seems more than reasonable. Jhin gets about 14% more damage on his R. That percentage is higher if he's having a bad game or a bit lower if he's having a really good game, but more damage on the R, more reliability from this champion. LeBlanc AD is getting hit really, really hard. This is not level 1 attack speed, by the way. This functionally means that further bonus attack speed is 1/3 less valuable. She's going to get about 15 less attack damage or 14 less attack damage at level 18. Her total mana pool for a mage build is going to be down around 15 to 20%. For an AD build, it's more like 30% less mana. In terms of just like having a lot less flat mana and mana regen in the late game, so it should meaningfully impact her AD build's ability to stay out of the map and so for a long time. As compensation, since all these things do very lightly hurt AP LeBlanc, she's getting a meaningful, this ends up being about 4% more damage on W. This ends up being about 8% more damage on E1, which should be pretty relevant. I promise to take a look at AP LeBlanc and make sure that she's looking okay next patch. If we need to buff her, of course we will. But the hope is to relatively make good on AP LeBlanc, but pretty heavily go after AD LeBlanc. That build is pretty illegal. Lee Sin jungle is a little bit constrained by Lee Sin in the lanes. There's a compensation nerf to Emax, which laners give second, and jungle Lee Sin leaves till last. But a pretty big bump to rank 1 W and 2 armor should be some, nice, decent amount of power to Lee Sin. Not much to say there. Lasana gets 0.15 seconds on the root duration. Pretty sweet. Make her more of a crowd control mage. I think, playing up a unique niche is pretty valuable. AP Nunu is quite popular and very, very weak. We're hoping to give about 2% win rate, but a 50% increase on the AP ratio of the first half of E should be pretty meaningful. We'll see what the result end up being, but again, the goal is 2% win rate to AP Nunu. I don't mind following up next patch if this is not quite on magnitude. Pyke gets some health growth and an incentive to maybe consider maxing W second. It's not that far off of E second, so it's maybe a possibility. And if you don't, it's still some power at level 14 plus, which is not huge, but it's a little bit more late game than Pyke, which honestly is late game kind of sucks. Rek'Sai gets hit really, really hard, and not just against her early game. Her healing is substantially down late game. Her Q is meaningfully nerfed until champion level 9. Her burrowed move speed is down by 10 until very late in the game where it's down 15. And Unburrow's damage, her last max, is no longer quite so bad per skill rank, but still a pretty bad rank of incentive overall. This is going to be a very heavy nerf to Rek'Sai. The hope is that it is very elite skewed, so we don't hit low elo too much, so we will hit them some. And if we go way over mag and Rek'Sai really, really sucks, we can bring some power back in more meaningful ways, probably in giving her a real combat pattern late game, because right now she really doesn't have one. Which kind of sucks, I think. Compared to, let's say, someone like Darius or Release, where those champions are certainly early game skewed, but, they have a function. They can do things late game. At least can throw out mage spells, and Repel is still a really good tool, and Darius still has the potential to have that, pop-off teamfight dream. I don't think Rek'Sai is very functional late game, and so finding ways to give her some tools later on, I think, if we have to rebuild her back up, can be the hope, down the line. Renekton trying to give him some sharper matchups, and so lowering his base MR should open up maybe AP matchups as possible counters. Syndra does some 5 flat damage on Q, a little bit of early game power, not much to say here, just a very, very light buff to Syndra. Twitch, QOL first, power second, though it will be power. Spray and Pray is less likely to miss your opponents when they're just kind of walking around randomly, though Flash and stuff will still dodge no problem. Zeri, I think, should definitely just not be a 335 move speed champion. 330, more than reasonable for a champion with a lot of mobility, though not a lot of hold you in place tools, just, this obviously multiplies against everything else on our kit, and so Reese will have the average range champion move speed here. Randall's Omen deserves a 10% price cut. It's honestly just weak. This now helps it actually rival the other health armor items, the other income tank armor items, and now it should be a reasonable option when you're facing double crit teams such as like Tristana Zaya. Seeker's Arm Guard is kind of weak. It really doesn't, I think, compare favorably to items like Hex Drinker. And it should. This should be a valuable, viable first item epic that you sit on as an answer to a losing lane. It shouldn't be an automatic purchase. I don't think it's tuned such that it will be one, but Arm Guard, a little bit weak, should look a bit better here. Static Shiv, we just intentionally nerfing a little bit there. Last patch was roughly power neutral, but this could stand to lose some power as Static Shiv. So a lot of this will be overtaken by Stormrazor or Kraken Slayer. That's fine. If Shiv is still valuable on its cohort of users, champs who would just kind of want a bump in wave clear, champs like Quinn and Vayne, that's great. That's all we really need here. It, as long as it has its cohort of users and it feels good for them, that's honestly a totally reasonable niche for Static Shift to have. I think we made it overly general earlier on, and that was a mistake, to be clear. All right, that's finished the patch. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Bye-bye.